Welcome back to the channel. I hope you enjoy.
Sacrifice. It was a gorgeous late summer evening at Fish Cove. The sky was tinted with beautiful variations of coral pink, orange, red as the sun prepared to set. The large flat white rocks overhanging the quietly heaving ocean were bathed in a brilliant glow. Locals were dotted along the rocks in the boardwalk which led up to the ocean's edge. Some strolled along the trails and boardwalk, others sat on benches strategically placed along the coast, contemplating the glittering waves and brilliant sky. All the human faces looking very noble and godlike in the golden hour. There was very little chatter. The summer waves and cries of the seagulls drowned any other sounds. A cruise ship moved majestically in the distance as smaller boats bobbed on the waves. Some folks were alone, others in little knots of twos, all spaced well apart. A little family of 4 walked along the boardwalk, which led up to a large flat boulder hanging 20 feet over the ocean. Dad was pushing a stroller, one of those modern ones which looked as though designed to run over into battle, while Mom held the hand of a toddler. They were a postcard perfect family, looking as though they had just stepped out of a baby designer catalog. Mom's hair shone in the evening light, the same color as the toddler's adorable mop of curls, while Dad's bright baseball cap and fit figure revealed his physical vitality. The family reached the end of the boardwalk. Dad bent and unstrapped the baby from the stroller. Holding baby close to his chest, he climbed up onto the large rock, followed by Mom and toddler, Mom helping toddler up. The family proceeded to the rock's edge and then stood there, solemnly looking out at the ocean and the burning sun. From Dad's arms, baby emitted a long, lonely cry, a piercing sound which carried over the waves. A couple making out on the bench closest to the rock paused and pulled apart, distracted by the cry. Their eyes flicked over reluctantly to the family, still standing quietly on the rock over the ocean. Dad was petting baby, and toddler was quite still, gripping Mom's hand. For a split second, it seemed as if everything became perfectly still. The waves, the seagulls, the boats. The couple stared at the family. In a smooth arc, Dad flung baby as far as he could over the waves, crying out, "Accept our sacrifice, Poseidon." The water seemed to open up. A burst of salty water captured baby and took it under. The couple watched Mom, Dad, and toddler turn back. Dad scooped up toddler and plonked him in the empty stroller, strapping him in safely. Mom raised her hand to her face to dash away a tear or flick away her hair, now whipping around her head in the stiff breeze. They walked away. The couple started kissing again. The end. Moist machines. I glanced at Tina and said, "Gather dishes, please." I didn't have to say please, but even though I was only 14 during the robot transition, which freed large swaths of the population from menial labor, I never seemed to have shaken the habit off. Tina rose stiffly, and I wondered whether she needed a tune-up. She smiled broadly at me, moved to the table, and started on the dishes. She was dressed in an old-fashioned European-style maid's outfit, complete with the frilly lace cap. Of course, we could dress her however we liked, or even have her nude as some did, but the trend for dressing the house tour robots in that type of dress never really died down. I switched on my visor and went back to what I was doing. Soon I found myself frowning in an effort to concentrate. There was no doubt Tina was making more noise than usual. There were several years left in her lifespan. She didn't become sick. Those genes had all been corrected. And she didn't request time off, because why would she? She had nowhere to go, no purpose other than serving us. Tina walked towards me. I was now thoroughly confused. I pushed my visor up. She opened her painted mouth and said through her lips, "I am tired. I need to rest." If she had struck me, I couldn't have been more flabbergasted. I knew technically robots were actually humans whose biology had been adjusted so they moved and talked in a more robotic fashion, making it easier to set them to the menial labor they had to perform throughout life. Even though we had the technology, it was far too expensive to build actual robots for mundane, low-skilled tasks and much more cost-efficient to repurpose surplus humans. This repurposing technology adapted them psychologically as well as physically for their duties, so they could serve as required without complaint and a minimum management hassle. They had to be fed, of course, and there were other maintenance tasks they needed for optimal running, but the company serviced them as per schedule, and I was sure that Tina was up to date on all of that. Or maybe not. Her eyes sparked with an emotion I had never seen in a house chore robot before. I discreetly thought at her company for help. The company sent back some info into my brain. "Okay, Tina," I said gently. "Can you sit down and rest for me?" Tina smiled broadly again, and the emotion in her eyes seemed to waver. "Yes." She moved back to her chair and sat down. We waited in silence. Soon enough, the company reps arrived. I had already returned to my work. They nodded at me as they efficiently lifted the now placid Tina up and took her out, and installed her replacement, Tanya, in the chair. They thought her info at me as they left. They were in and out in under 10 minutes. The end. Maisie's kisses. Maisie realized her kisses kill when she was about 10. She was at the playground with her friend Henry. They ran over the seesaw together, holding hands for some reason. And then, by the seesaw, Henry leaned over and kissed her fully on the lips, before letting go of her hand and jumping on the seat. Maisie stood still for a moment, confused, then ran to the other side, raised her arms, gripped the seat, pulled it down, and jumped on. Henry went up, and then he fell like a stone with a very loud thud. He lay crumpled on the rubbery pink playground gravel, dead. They said it was a random heart failure, but Maisie knew better. After that, she avoided boys. Boys didn't like that, especially as she was a pretty little thing with soft, curvy lips, and the more she avoided them, the more they tried to kiss her. There was Jerry, who cornered her in the school cloakroom and kissed her with a loud smacking sound. She wriggled out of his grasp and dashed out, only to hear once again that loud thud. She knew before she turned around that he was dead, lying lifeless among the stinky sneakers littering the floor. And Michael, who stole a kiss on the bus just before his stop. He remained alive long enough to reach the door, then tumbled out head first onto the pavement below. And poor Paul. Maisie actually liked Paul. He was so good looking with bright sparkly eyes, and he was so kind and smart. They did homework together. They both wanted to be doctors. He helped her patiently with maths while she wrote up his essays. He would never kiss her suddenly when she didn't want it. She hoped desperately that would make a difference, inching closer and closer to him in their study sessions, letting her hand accidentally on purpose brush against his until he asked politely, "Maisie, I have been dying to kiss you. May I?" She forgot about her curse in her hormonal adolescent delight and leaned forward with her lips parted and her eyes shining. "Oh, Paul," she breathed. As his lips pressed softly but firmly against hers, her whole body filled with joy and she could barely let him pull away. They looked deeply into each other's eyes, glowing with young love. And then she shrieked out in despair as the light dimmed in his eyes. He slumped over while she sobbed uncontrollably. She never forgave herself. She gave up her dream of becoming a doctor and relentlessly pursued another career, specializing in dealing with unwanted husbands and lovers, a surprisingly lucrative field. She smiled at her latest prey, Jason, sitting across the restaurant table. She didn't feel bad anymore. Those emotions were long gone. She had a job to do, and he shouldn't have asked her out when she was already married. Asshole. She leaned in. She was busy and didn't want to waste too much time on this one. The end. Drowning. It was a hot, sunny day. The flock of seagulls circled the crowded shoreline lazily, waiting for the drowning child to die. The mother was lying on the beach, collapsed back from summer malaise and heat exhaustion. There was a lifeguard too, but the beach was as crowded as one could expect on a bright August day, and there was no way he could see one child growing increasingly still amongst the splashy crowds. The waves were not as gentle as they appeared, as the seagulls knew well. They circled closer, hoping the treacherous waves would pull the body into further before anyone noticed, leaving it for them to munch on. A child's body was a veritable feast, a welcome relief from the dull, crusty leftover picnic offerings. Fish had become increasingly scarce in these waters, and the need for meaty protein was intense. A couple of seagulls broke ranks, swooping down quite low, impatient and hungry. The others broke into loud, angry, whooping reprimands. They needed no one to spot the child until the waves had pulled it out much farther. Any earlier, and the humans would run and scream and worse, pull out the body, leaving nothing for them. The child made a desperate attempt to pull himself up from the waves, and for a moment, their distorted face emerged from the water, gasping. Their little legs had lost contact with the ground a while ago, and they were scrabbling for last breaths. They felt the heat of the sun and the salty water filling their mouth and lungs, and they saw the flying seagulls around them so close. Feathers brushed their face before they sank back under. The seagulls acted in unison, swooping, crying out and flying low amongst the splashers, deflecting attention from the child in their final throes. The lifeguard idly noticed the low-flying seagulls, but the swell of the water and sand hid the struggling child from his view. Everything seemed to be as it should be. The mother thought she would give herself another 2 minutes with eyes closed before hauling herself up and screaming her kid's name. The child was quite still now, and the waves were pulling them in further away from the shore very fast. In less than 2 minutes, the body would be completely irrecoverable, out of the reach of even the most skilled lifeguard. The seagulls were now forming a kind of barrier between the floating body and the other bathers, who were instinctively moving away from the beaky platoon. The child wasn't completely dead yet when the seagulls, unable to wait any longer, dived in for the first bite. The mother reluctantly pushed herself up and began scanning the water.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to one of my videos. I'll catch you in the next one. Ciao.